I think that the overall theme of the ZBrush Summit over the course of the last 3 days has been that transitional idea of traditional and physical sort of construction. And without further ado, I think we're going to talk about that a little more. I'm so glad you're here to do this with me live.
Yeah, let's do it.
Back in the studio. I think we're going to hand it over to Paul Gabory is on location, American Fine Art Foundry, like I said. Let's hand it over to Paul Gabory with a very special presentation. We're going to take it from ZBrush to basically to bronze.
Yeah.
On look. Hey guys, there you go.
All right.
What's going on,
Good
Brett?
morning.
Good morning.
How are you guys doing, Troy?
Doing great. How are you guys?
Well, we're really good. We know that we've somewhere in there, Paul is hiding in wait, but we're going to talk to you for a couple of moments before I know he's off stage managing the situation up there. We're located in sunny Southern California. American Fine Art Foundry is one of America's oldest and most revered and celebrated foundries, having produced some of the finest historical works and sculptural works over the past 40 years. That is not an understatement. Tell us a little bit about what's been going on. Brett first. How are you doing?
Well, we're doing great. I mean, it's been a lot of fun here. The projects that we get involved in are everything from historical projects that would date back to a little-known sculptor by the name of Da Vinci, all the way forward to contemporary works for some of the studios around here. Having recently finished a project for Breaking Bad for Sony Pictures, as well as last year we delivered a 7.5-foot Batman for Warner Brothers and the city of Burbank to be a selfie spot downtown. So we never know what's going to show up every day. It's every day is different.
Ian, he's hit the home run right out of the gate with the mention of the monument. We had the monument challenge, right? We got a new monument in Burbank. Ian's local to Burbank. I'm sure he spent some time around that. Tell us about it.
Absolutely. Dude, it's I'm 6'4". That's a massive statue, and it's so cool to stand right next to the Batman. And it just, you feel like you're taking another world.
Do you do the voice when you walk up to you say, "Oh, Batman"? And then with you along for the ride today is Troy Koenig-Wilcox. Troy, what is going on and how are you doing out there?
I'm doing great. Yeah. So our studio is, it's a modern studio that we provide our clients with, techniques to take their vision from ZBrush and even straight clay sculpting to bronze by 3D printing for direct casting, as well as CNC milling and other services that we provide, 3D scanning.
A true fusion of processes we're seeing here across the last couple of days, and we're really happy to have you guys along for the ride to show us and demonstrate what's going to happen. You'll also be responsible, people might not know this, for producing a bronze sculpture for the winner of this year's Sculpt-Off. What a reason to join the Sculpt-Off. Tell us a little bit about that, and are you excited to do that?
Oh yeah, so once the winner is selected, we'll take their model. I'll kind of talk with Brett as far as how it gets, actually I think initially we'll probably have to talk to the artist, because one thing about ZBrush models is if, it has to be in, printable and also castable. Like the Batman, we had issues with when you sculpt the cape and all those things in ZBrush, you have the cape drape over the back, and then it becomes this other space. So you have all these different layers that if you cast it, it would be layers in bronze you don't need. So you would want to go back into ZBrush and join the cape to the back of the body and then fix it. So you kind of just have to kind of understand the end process and how it's going to get there. And so that's kind of the first step. And then, so once the, model is selected, then we'll go ahead and talk with them in the foundry and then get it cast up for them, printed for them.
It sounds like an incredible procedure, and I know that the people at home are clamoring around their screens. Both Brett and Troy are going to walk us through this experience, experientially speaking.
Oh yeah,
we are on to something, Ian.
It's going to be amazing. Seriously,
Are you excited?
I'm super excited to see the winners and see who they actually are able to work with. But more importantly, I think Troy had a little show, a little walk
That's
around?
exactly what I was going to say next. Yeah, let's take it away with Troy. He's going to give us a little walkthrough.
Yeah.
Yep. And before you do that, real quick, just wanted to note to the chat and the audience, I am reading the chat here today. I am Paul 2.0, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I got the chat here. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to fire them off, and then we'll get to the questions as soon as possible.
That's a fine interjection right there. And remember, we will get to the questions when possible. There are lots of people sending them in. They'll take it away, Troy, with this lovely piece. You might notice that the piece, before you go any further, I'd like to pause for a second, Troy, and say that that is actually the cheetah that has been riding high behind myself and Ian on set, and Paul Gabry. So let's take it away, Troy. Show us the wares, as they say.
Yeah, so you can just see he just clicked over his other. Once we get the model like this, I talked to Brett, and we'll kind of go over the scale, confirm the scale of the model. We talk about where he wants it cut for direct casting into what his panel sizes are. Since this is a small piece, 18 inches, we just cut it into 3 pieces, hollowed it to 3/16. So, and that's one of the benefits of direct casting, is because the old way of casting, when you pour a wax, you'll get varying thicknesses of the wax because of just the way wax cools. So this is, the whole model is 3/16 thick for direct casting. So then once we cut it into the 3 pieces, he'll then nest it into a job box with a bunch of other parts, and then start the printer. And the printing process takes about 72 hours for a full box. Or I'm going to walk you into the where the 3D printer is.
Oh, the sweet sound of machinery, Ian.
I know, yeah.
Oh yeah, you're going to get some of that.
We don't mind.
No. I'm no stranger to that. I was in manufacturing for a long time, way before my artistry.
Ian hears the sounds of machines and a smile comes across his face. He's he's glad to be far away.
This is our large format voxel jet printer. It prints a PMMA, which is an acrylic powder, and it's cured with cyanoacrylate, which is basically super glue. The head right now is going back and forth and printing layer by, it's just curing the model layer by layer. And in a second, it's going to put another thin layer of powder across.
Wow, that's a massive machine, isn't it?
Look at the size of that thing.
Yeah.
So our job box is 20 inches wide by 20 inches tall by about 40 inches deep. So you can fit like a whole life-size figure in one of these boxes, or up to like a 7-foot figure. Cutting it up into direct.
Holy smoke!
Panels.
You could fit a Paul Gabry or an Ian Robinson in there.
Yes,
Said 7 feet. What the heck?
As soon as he said 7 feet, Ian looked over at me and smiled.
By the way,
His sinister grin.
Because he said it so casually, like, oh yeah, just 7 feet. Just don't worry about that.
Up to 7 feet. Okay, you fit all 3 of us in there if we snuggle.
So we then kind of place, once we've done all the cutting, he then pulls it into the job box with all the other jobs and see how it fits and assembles and fits in there with everything that's going on.
Yeah, wow.
Really cool.
And we try to get the box as dense as we can, get as many parts as we can in that box. And even at that, I think it's what'd you say, like 5% is our
4.5%, 5% density.
Yeah, so it's not very dense. I mean, the denser the more parts we can pull out of it, the better for us. And I think next you had a video clip of the unpacking of the cheetah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's take it to tape. But by the way, the guy managing that computer's got a wonderful toque on his head. Look at him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Roll the tape.
Yeah. So that is after the job box has been printed. It rests for 2 days, or it rests for a day, and then we put it into an unpack station, which I'm going to take you over to the unpack station, and then it's kind of like an archaeological dig. It gets pulled out and then sprayed off with an air hose, and then and then I think you can go to the next video of it being dipped.
Yeah, let's have a look at the
wax.
dip.
Yeah.
Here he is.
The dip.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Just tosses it in. Whoop, there it goes.
So that's He dips it in there a few times so the wax penetrates all the way through. So the material that we print is really porous. And so when it's dipped in the hot wax, it penetrates all the way through the surface, and you want a good coating. And then, hang on. So go over here. And if you go to the next video of the finishing with the heat gun.
Look at that.
Next one after that. That's the other one.
Yeah.
And it should be noted, he's going to dip this in here a few times, correct?
Yeah, correct. So he gets, so it kind of soaks all the way through.
Okay.
And yeah, so now they're using a heat gun. They put another layer of paraffin basically over top of it. If you can see, they are prepping each one of these panels for direct casting by like going in and refinishing, getting all the drips of wax that were on there, and adding another layer and just kind of tightening up that surface.
How long does it take for that wax to dry, so to speak?
Pretty much immediate.
Oh, wow. Okay, great.
Okay.
Heat gun, like it just cools off real quick, and then it's good.
Right. And how many times do they dip it, you think?
They dip it once, and then they put a second. So then that goes all the way through the surface, and then they add, and that is not paraffin. It's another type of wax, like close to finishing wax. And then they put a layer of paraffin over top of that, and then and then they'll burnish it with brushes and tools. And they'll use sculpting tools to tighten up the detail where the wax settles in and pulls that back out.
That's awesome.
Wow, that's an incredible process already. Just watching that.
Mind blown.
alone. And we haven't even gotten to the bronzing yet.
No, there's not, we're not even close to bronzing yet. Are you kidding me? This is just scratching the surface here at the beginning of the process. Already elated, and I'm sure there's some chat things happening, but we're going to wait, like we said, for a minute.
Well, we
unless you've got a
actually-
pressing issue.
Well, what's actually the consensus is, they're looking at this whole process and they're looking at the expense or the cost of something like this. This is not a simplistic process indeed.
No.
Troy, Brett, I don't know if you could talk about that a little bit of like just an idea of what something like this, if anyone's interested in getting their statues bronze, what that looks like financially, I guess.
Well,
I'll let you go
us,
first.
Okay, yeah. For us, we basically we've kind of set up a system of quoting based on the surface area of the model. So, and also kind of back to the Batman point, if a model comes to us and we have to kind of re-engineer it and fix it so it is printable, then that's like a CAD cost that we will put into our quote to make the model printable,
Right.
and castable. And so then we go on surface area and how it fits in that job box that I showed you. So we have determined that it's if we can get like I guess we can get like a whole 6-foot figure into a job box, it's probably about 10 grand to do like a life-size figure, maybe a little less.
Okay, so there's your barometer. 10 grand equals 10,000 US dollars. Those are green
Yeah.
Benjamins, as they call it.
Yeah, and
10,000 of them.
we did have, we also had another question too. I know you mentioned it already, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about what was the material you were 3D printing with specifically. We're very
So
interested.
it's a blend, but it's an acrylic powder.
Okay.
Basically, it's simplified terms, it's an acrylic powder, and the binder is simplified terms, cyanoacrylate or super glue.
It's amazing to see the transition in material composition when dealing with production of these types of assets over the course of even the last 15 years, for instance. And historically speaking, along the trajectory of sculpture, the fact that we have these materials available today and that they're so robust and so quick and easy to work with is really helping to push the envelope of design. Is that something you would agree with?
Oh yeah, for sure. They have limitations as far as like the account for the shrinkage of the parts. So we scale up the models slightly, and then also for bronze casting, it's not as much shrinkage as wax, but there is some shrinkage, so you have to account for that. The parts when we were dipping it, if we do large panels for monuments, you they can, when they get into that wax bath, they can shift. So we'll sometimes reinforce them with like MDF sticks to support the back of the panel so it maintains its shape.
Wow.
That's fantastic. Another behind the veil view into a process that is not really understood by the general public. I'm so happy that we're bringing this to the people at home.
Yeah, this is incredible. I mean, just taking a look at just the in-depth, and like Troy was calling out earlier, it's like an archaeological dig to get to experience. Could we talk a little bit more about that process? I mean, I know you said you kind of like find the part and then you're kind of digging it out a little bit, but like, is there a little bit more, because we have a lot of 3D printing enthusiasts like myself and in the chat too, so I'm sure they're curious, what's the difference between a machine like that versus something they have at home like resin printing or FDM printing?
Or like the SLA printers. Yeah. So this one, you saw that image of the job box where you had the parts in it. Sometimes if we know that there's some delicate parts in there, we'll print out an image of what's in that job box so the person that is doing the archaeological dig knows to be delicate in certain areas, not start removing the material too fast, or you go in with brushes and you slowly clear out the part so you don't break the part. That excess powder does hold it, and keeps the part shape until it's dug out of there, and then that leftover material gets recycled to use in the next printing process. And
And then the other thing I wanted to ask you was about challenges that you might have experienced. Like you said, you would have to add CAD costs to make repairs to things. What are some of the things that people should be aware of and look out for when preparing files to send over to you in advance? What are some things, and go through the list or the gamut of things that people should not be doing?
Yeah, I think sometimes dynameshing does help, but I think the main thing is when you create models, at the end it needs to be one complete model that I can hollow for one, and then elements that lay over other elements, because I will need to make them all one. What is a hollow? An element that a part that I can hollow. So you don't have a lot of, because if you think of like that Batman situation, you think of a cape laying over top of something. That's a whole layer of bronze that's going to be laying over top of a back. The back doesn't really need to be there for bronze. So I think the main thing is that if you're creating something for a monument, kind of ask for help or talk to me or talk to Brett on, okay, I'm creating this model. How can I prepare it for the printing process as well as the casting process?
Let me take something from what you just said and extrapolate that over to Brett. And then how does that transition happen with you, Brett? How do you sort of communicate with him regarding what he just said?
Yeah, so really this whole process of is magic. We're taking a digital file that doesn't exist in 3D physical form, and we're turning it into something that's tangible. The thing that we rely on Troy to guide us is what does he need to do to have it hollowed out for printing? And then we have to be in connection with each other, because sometimes what's optimum for him is an optimum for us. So there's a bit of a collaboration about how do we solve both of our challenges so that we can end up with the best result at the end. And we do need things hollowed out as well. That's one thing we have in common. We need the surfaces to be really clean and tight, because whatever is captured in that print is going to be captured in the bronze. It truly will pick up everything that's there. So we need to make sure that flows through seamlessly. And then we don't want any trapped areas inside the sculpt. So as an example, on the Batman project, Troy mentioned the back and the cape, but we also had a problem with the tool belt. The tool belt was sculpted in incredible detail all around behind, but it was sandwiched between his backside and the cape, which was never going to be visible to anybody. And so all that area had to be cut out and then seamed together between the cape and the torso to eliminate all the pockets that would have trapped for Troy the PMMA powder that wasn't fused, and for us would have created hollow spots that we needed to avoid from a casting standpoint. So what that translates to ultimately is economics, because if we aren't printing or casting sections that aren't visible and aren't needed, we're saving you money. So it's worth putting the extra effort into the file prep up front, so that what Troy and I have to work with is the most straightforward model possible.
This raises two questions. I'm sure Ian and I are both chomping to ask this. You're both talking about the hollowing process. Maybe swing it back over to Troy. Talk about the hollowing process and what that might look like for people who are coming into this as a newcomer.
Yeah, so it's pretty much a click. We use a file prep program, Magix, for printing, prepping our files for printing. And it's basically you just click the hollowing icon and set the thickness you want. And most foundries, Brett included, 3/16 is a great thickness for bronze casting. So you just enter that value.
You're talking 3/16 of an inch. That's
correct.
U.S. inch.
Correct. Yeah, so I mean,
Important. Yesterday we had someone here talking about millimeters and centimeters. It really threw things off.
oh right, yeah. I'm still kind of.
We all are. We all are.
Yeah. So, and it's funny is that the printer I showed you, as well as our 3D scanning system, all of it's German engineering. So all of it is in millimeters, but I have to convert it back and forth just because I can't figure it out. So,
well, that's good to hear. As a Nemetschek employee here in the Maxon banner, I think I'm happy to hear it's German engineering at its finest.
There you go.
And so are we.
Yeah.
So the other thing,
I think,
go ahead, please, Brett.
Yeah, the one thing I was going to say is it seems like a relatively straightforward process to just send your file to Troy. Troy sends the print to me, and off we go. But there is a lot of collaboration back and forth between the different steps. Troy and I on this particular project will go back and forth, I don't know, Troy, 3 to 10 times, depending on the simplicity of the project, to make sure we have it all dialed in. And
for that man, it was more like 10.
Or 20. Yeah, it was a lot of work.
Or 20.
We actually had to re-engage the sculptor who was used to sculpting toy models and things like that. And no slight against him. He was doing what he was typically doing.
What does that look like for you?
Him about the process.
What do you mean when you say that, Brett, that you're talking about what he's typically used to doing? What do you usually see in that case?
Well, in the Batman case, it was originally modeled after an action figure that was created as about an 8-inch toy. And so the cape was designed to be a removable item. And there was some other attachments and accessories that went with it. So we had to unify all that into just one piece and strip it all back. And the same issue that I was relating about the tool belt it was a perfect example, or what Troy said about the back. We weren't going to be making a 350-pound removable cape. So there was no need to have that functionality and articulation in the model.
Right.
Wow, that's super incredible. We do have another question coming in, specifically why you guys use Magic over any other slicer. Is there something that Magix does that you really like, and that's why it's your slicer of choice?
Yeah, it's I think one, its usability is great as far as creating scenes. You can create your job box scenes or whatever dimension for whatever printer you're using. You can have multiple scenes. It has ability to like fix the parts for bad edges and inverted triangles and some things that also happens in ZBrush, like the way it gets sculpted or more so the way that like the OBJ gets exported and turned into an STL for 3D printing can throw up errors. And this program will fix those errors. And then slicing and hollowing, adding, I guess, support pins and advanced cuts of adding a tongue and groove to a part, all those things that it has. I mean, it's a great program for that.
And I guess it's really democratizing the process of opening this up for a lot more people, to be honest with you.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, 100%.
Listen, I don't want to get too carried away, but I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I really want to now come back to Brett, and I want to talk about the hollowing process in traditional materials. You said that it needs to be hollowed. What can you tell us about that? Someone comes to you with something that weighs about 300 pounds. What do you do in that case, where it's all clay and it's got clay right down to an armature?
Yeah. So in the traditional way of doing it, we would make a mold from essentially the solid form of clay, and it's a rubber mold backed by a supporting jacket. We then take the mold sections, and depending on the size of the piece, we're either going to do what we call wax slushing, where we pour wax into the mold, and then we roll it around, and we make sure we coat the entire inside of that rubber. Then we pour out the rest of the wax back into the tank, and we'll do that 2, 3, 4 times, depending on what we're trying to accomplish, with progressively cooler waxes, so we don't melt out the prior layers. And it's the same process they use to make chocolate Easter bunnies or other confections. So it's we're essentially leaving behind a shell of wax inside the mold. And then we let it cool completely, and then at that point we demold it, and we have a hollow wax that we can then take forward. And now that's anything that's probably thicker than 3/4 of an inch. Once you get down into thinner dimensions, if you think about 3/16 backed up to each other, 2-sided casting, that's 3/8 of an inch thick. Trying to create a hollow space between anything less than, probably 3/4 of an inch doesn't make sense. So for example, on the piece, we're going to be showing the cheetah that was on the backdrop there. And as we take it through the process, the legs and the tail are solid, but the body cavity and the rock are hollow. So that's, some of those judgments have to come into play in terms of how we produce the piece and how we actually do the original mold.
Oh, that's just fascinating.
Wow.
Slushies and chocolates.
Yeah.
Slushies and chocolates. Yeah. And I think one of the things that's worth pointing out here is we work tremendously closely with Form, and Troy specifically for me, because he's our project manager. We pioneered this process using a technology that was in the aerospace industry and in the automotive industry, primarily used for engine parts and pump housings and commercial castings. But we both were inspired by the fact that this process gives us a wax surface that we need in the art business. A lot of 3D prints, you see the grow lines, and they're very difficult to remove. Whereas now we're working in wax, which is a much easier and simpler material to shape and to tool and to wax chase, as we call it, and get it ready for casting. And the reason, and there's other places we could go to do it, but the reason we like to work with Troy's team is that they are all sculptors by training and by, their own personal passions. And so when we give them projects, they're looking at the projects as a sculptor, and they're getting into the head of the sculptor, and they're getting into the technology of the solution. So our dialogue is, it's the how-to, but it's also how do we optimize for the design and the original intent of the sculptor to create the masterpiece in a collaborative way. Because this whole process is a tremendous leap of faith by the artist to pass the project off to another team, and in this case, 2 teams, to actually take it through to completion and give them back the result they intended.
Where do you think some of the hesitation might come from in that regard? What are some things that you've heard from people that their concerns are when transferring their work over to you for that purpose?
Well, beyond the sort of commercial things like, are you going to steal my intellectual property? Things like that,
Wow.
Which is a concern from time to time. We have to sign non-disclosure agreements and things like that. But I always remind people we're a 45-year-old plus business. And if we made a habit of stealing our clients' intellectual property, we probably would not have been in business for 45 years.
Certainly
so
not.
it's part of the business model. And I think
Unless you've got a bunch of masochists for clients.
right. Yeah. Just put
Hey, let's go over to Brett and see if we can get ripped off like the last
Yeah.
guy. Said no one ever.
Exactly.
So we take it very seriously. And in fact, we're going to do our best today as we're walking through the foundry to protect the intellectual property of our other clients by not putting them on screen. Some of the biggest projects we've been part of, I can't even talk about because of the non-disclosure agreements. So those are things we just have to keep in mind.
Oh, absolutely.
Ian, you got anything there on the chat?
Well, right now, just so many people are just blown away by this whole aspect. I was looking for questions. They were really interested in magics, and they did have a question about, like, some people use NetFab, some people use magics and stuff. So they were really excited to hear about the reasons why you use magic. I'm curious, Brett, real quick. You have this awesome background behind you. Look like samples of steel. Can you talk about that a little bit, or what's going on behind you?
Yeah. So behind me are sample plates of patinas, and I'll try to give you just a little bit of rotation here so maybe we can see the number of them that we have. So we've got about 300 sample plates on the wall. And these are all bronze, except for a couple of exceptions, which are stainless steel. And then we've even got some more over on this wall.
Oh, wow.
It's a whole nother collection. So
it's a whole art piece back there.
yeah, it's so these are all different patinas. So the reason that the bronze has been so used in final sculpture is that it will take color. So we can do an oxidative process that is a combination of different chemicals, typically salts and acids, mixed to different solution strengths that we can then catalyze with heat, typically a torch, to create different effects. And a lot of what you see behind me is traditional materials, sometimes layered with more contemporary materials, but all designed to give pattern, color, in some cases a little bit of texture, but basically to give a palette to our clients to say, okay, where do you want to go besides brown? And this is always a jumping off point for people just to get the conversation started.
I think it's fascinating. Ian, that was a great question coming through there about the dexterity of color and the type of thing that is possible on the surface. I wanted to ask you in conjunction with that, what about a mixture of materials? Have you ever done any kind of fusion?
We have. We did a project. It was something I'd always thought about, and it seemed like it should be easily done because whenever we do a monumental sculpture, the armature for it is always done in stainless steel, typically 304, sometimes 316, depending on its final destination. And so when we have that, it's then, we have the bronze that's around it. So there's a good reaction, minimal reaction, I should say, between the bronze and the stainless. Get me camera. There we go. So the client had this idea to do a lion. It was a lion bust, and I believe it was going to a zoo. And she wanted to capture the beauty of the bronze, but she also wanted to give an effect of an older grizzled lion. So what she ended up doing, we helped her. We cut the face out in stainless steel and cast that in stainless, and then we did the mane in bronze. We were able to get a really rich, warm, coppery, orangey, yellowy mane with lots of highlights and things. And then we did the face, and we were able to oxidize that stainless enough to give it a bit of a gray cast, and the gray metal underneath gave it this old grizzled look. It really was a stunning piece. And it was fun to see a way to take two materials not usually shown together and do it that way.
Oh, wow. Actually, we had a question coming in. Since you're talking about materials, I'm going to kind of lump in my question with this question. Do you do other materials as well, more specifically gold gliding, if I got the question right? Is there anything you do with that?
No. Primarily we're bronze, but we also have a long history of doing stainless steel work as well. And we're one of the only art foundries that cast stainless. And we've been messing around with stainless for probably 40 years. Stainless is a harder material. It takes more heat to melt, and it is therefore more expensive because it just takes a tremendous amount more labor to tool and to polish. We've done a little bit in aluminum, but aluminum has got a lot of its own nuances and problems, so we typically stay away from it. It doesn't finish well, and unless you're planning to do something like an automotive body shop finish on it, it doesn't lend itself really well to a lot of color and effect. There's no such thing as a patina, and you could finish it out, but it's just, we find it more trouble than it's generally worth. We have done a few projects in silver. We're limited to a 6-pound casting in silver. And we did one of the Leonardo da Vinci horse and rider pieces in silver.
Oh, wow.
Which was about 6 pounds of silver. So not an inexpensive casting. But generally we don't get a lot of call for that. We do every once in a while. And people have asked about gold. I had somebody that wanted to do gold busts of his clients, and we ended up pricing out what that was going to be, and tried to find a vault locally that would take the gold, and nobody wanted to store it locally while we were getting ready to cast 30-pound sculpture. So
right, for obvious reasons.
It's got other inherent problems. Yeah.
That's a security, if I ever heard one, that's a security concern if I ever heard 30 pounds of gold. Hey, did you hear about the 30 pounds of gold Brett's holding in this facility?
Yeah, they got stolen from AFA. Yeah.
Here comes the man in the black hat. Ian, straddle up. We're riding wild.
Yeah.
Let me ask you something. Ian rose a great question there. When you talked of the stainless steel, I really would like to know what are some of the applications, and I'm sure other people would like to know as well, what are some of the applications that have been done in stainless steel? Are those more monument-based pieces or installation-based stuff? Like what gets done in stainless steel versus bronze?
Most of the time it's figurative, but or it's something that's abstract and contemporary. Stainless steel lends itself to a more techie look, more contemporary look. There's not a lot you can do to colorize it. We can force patina on it in more of the browns and grays and black tones. Takes a lot of heat to get it to change. A lot of times what we do is polish certain areas and then do a matte finish on others through sandblasting. And so you get a contrast of texture on the surface. It works best if the sculptor plans ahead for what section is going to be which, and then we can execute it in the end. And then oftentimes we'll do we'll drizzle in some pigment or wash it into, it sits down in the crevices and gives some additional contrast. And, just mostly stainless steel ends up being high polished because it gives you a nickel plated look without some of the complications of nickel plating, which can fail down the road in terms of corrosion on the piece. After plating. So we typically just encourage people to go, if you want that look, just go straight to stainless and avoid yourself the headaches down the road.
Yeah, and it's probably more weather resistant. I'm going to blow my own sort of local Torontonian horn. I went to a high school called, I was, my alma mater, of one of them is a Harvard Collegiate Institute, is this school that has one of the last remaining war monuments in front of it. It's the Lone Soldier. And it's in Toronto, Canada, where it's cast in bronze, and it's been there for decades, almost a century at this point. The one thing I did notice when I was visiting was a stainless steel H that is outside, and I was wondering about the complications of being exposed to the elements. I guess there wouldn't really be that much corrosion or erosion in that case, sitting out in the winter, Canadian winter. Is that right?
Yeah, stainless steel's got a lot more longevity to it. If you use the right alloys, there's a lot of different alloys of stainless, and art always needs to really be the finest we can get. And even vendor to vendor, it matters. And I've been in a conversation recently with one of the major studios who needs some pieces for Asia, and they're very concerned because they've used 304 stainless steel alloy before, and it ended up rusting, even though it's very low iron or low carbon. They've still had problems from the ambient moisture in the air. So we're going to go with the highest grade 316 to help avoid those issues on future projects. By the way, that wasn't our project that failed. It was somebody else's.
Sure, yeah, no, we are very clear about it. None of his projects failed. And in that case, I guess both Ian and I will come to the same conclusion, and we're looking at each other thinking the same thing. What might be one of the most challenging ones that you've worked on in casting the bronze, or casting in steel, as you're mentioning? What's one that sticks out?
Well, the most difficult project I think we've done to date, we did a project for an artist, Bill Mack, who's in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He had a contract with the new Four Seasons Hotel there, and he had a concept to do it's essentially 7 children's blocks that are 3-foot cubed, and they have a letter on each side, and the letters spell out the word imagine, inspired by John Lennon. And he originally brought us the project as a concept, just a sketch, and said, this is what I want to do. We came up with a strategy for it, gave him a price, and then he came back a few days later and said, well, after looking at it, I really want to make sure that it looks like the top cube is falling over, and that all the other cubes are kind of stacked at an angle, and and we can't see the armature on any of it. So that did increase the price, I will admit, but we had to really figure out the engineering, which involved us bringing in a structural engineer and having him come up with a concept to support the load all the way through. The other thing that we were told as we got down into the project was we were only going to have a 14-foot ceiling height to install a 13.5-foot sculpture. and we had to get through a 10-foot door. So there was a lot of things we had to figure out. We also had to figure out how to disassemble and reassemble the piece once it got through the door, and then make all of the armature invisible to the eye. So it's a project we finished and installed in July or June of this year. Super proud of it. The team here did an amazing job, executed it. The artist was super happy. If you look at it, you're going to be hard pressed to find out where the armature is. I think we came up with a really good solution, but that's the kind of stuff we get challenged with all the time. And one of the reasons why I call myself the chief collaborator here at AFA, because it requires art, but engineering and, problem solving in multiple different disciplines often.
Oh man, you're making my heartstrings. You're pulling the heartstrings. One of my favorite things in the world, to be friends with an engineer and be a designer, is a gift sent from the gods. If somewhere my buddy Oscar is smiling because we've done many things together. Ian, have you got another thing from the chat box for us before we start to get ready for the big show?
Well, honestly, a lot of wows, and they were all really interested in what gold would cost if they had a full gold bust statue.
I think you can look it up. I mean, you just look up the price of gold and calculate at 30 pounds, and you know that it's dangerous, as he said.
It's a
it's funny.
Discussion, yeah.
In most of the bronze projects we do, a lot of people, think that the cost of bronze at any given time is really going to make a big difference. It's really labor. The cheetah that you have in your backdrop there and that we're going to follow through the process has probably got 25 plus hours of labor in it in the foundry. So that right there. So you can see that that's going to take that labor cost is generally more than the materials costs. And if you flip it around and do it in gold, I can tell you that the materials cost will be greater than the labor cost. But anyway, yep. So when you're ready to walk, we can walk unless there's more questions.
I think
got one more question.
Yes, I think we got
time for one more question. I think we might have briefly touched on it, but just to reiterate, because they're really curious, what is the biggest project you've worked on that you can talk about?
Probably the biggest project. We did a project for a Jewish temple in Beverly Hills, and it is two sets of hands, the hands of Moses and the hands of God, passing the Torah. And I believe the final dimensions on that are close to 30 feet.
Wow.
That's incredible.
That's quite impressive. And then, Troy, the materials question I had for you was, I guess there are ways to work with different materials in 3D printing as well, to have something like, for instance, a rubber tube around your little character versus some of the harder plastics you're working with. Does that ever get requested?
A rubber tube?
Let's say perhaps there's a part of the model that you're doing for that's not going to be cast. Is that something that people can expect to be able to do with 3D printers? They can switch materials?
Not with our 3D printers. Well, we have a couple SLA printers that smaller printers that like jewelry size wax prints that we'll do.
Okay.
Whereas like the PMMA is for large formats. So like for me, if a figure gets below like third life, the detail, I think you need to go with like an SLA or a photopolymer printer that can capture that tight detail at a small scale. And if you want to direct cast it should be printed in like a wax or which they're available now for SLA printers. And then, so.
Good to know. That's good to know. And as you said, I guess we're going to move on, but I think the key point there is size matters, and you bet it does. I got Tower of Power, Ian Robinson to my left, and we've got another Tower of Power. Our very own Paul Gabriel is on location with Brett at American Fine Art Foundry. I'm going to pass it on to our new mobile correspondent.
Everybody's been wondering, okay, what happened to Paul? They just swapped it out for this dude over here.
Switched him over.
They put the same shirt on and said, all right, fine, be Paul 2.0. It's like, no, we got Paul, don't worry.
We've got Ian local, and we've got Paul on location. On behalf of myself, Louis Tucci, and Ian Robinson, Paul, take it away from AFA, American Fine Art Foundry. Give us the tour with the Christmas tree, apparently.
All right, let's go take a walk. All right, yeah, Brett's going to join me here in a second. I'm super excited for this part to give you guys the ability. First of all, Brett, thank you so much for opening up your studio, and Troy too for teaming together and doing this with us. It's a lot of fun. I'm super excited to show everybody what we're going to be showing them today. It is a working shop, everybody, right? So,
Yeah, this is actual work going on. It's
Yeah.
production time. We're going to try and keep things quiet. If we need to, we might have to just duck out and ask them to stop for a minute. We're super excited because this is becoming the future of sculpting. You know, every time there's an opportunity with technology, it seems to find its way. And we're in an industry that's existed, depending on how you count it, for over 3,000 years. There's not been a lot of innovation. Here's one that we can all really grab hold of, and it's got a lot of applications and a lot of different kinds of projects.
right. So before we get going, though, I wanted to ask, how did it come to that you said, hey, I'm going to buy a foundry and get going?
We don't have enough time
How long
for
you
that.
owned it now?
I've owned it 19 years.
19 years. That's
Yeah, I'm the third owner.
Yeah.
I bought it from my predecessor who had it for 6, and then the guy before that had it for the rest of the time. Who actually we are still friends with. He's,
Oh, nice.
He's actually, he's even here today, just coincidentally. We collaborate on some of that engineering and brainstorming because he loves it. He's been doing this a long time, and he's got a lot of good insights for me. And
Yeah.
we bounce ideas around, and he's just a good friend.
And you told him about what we're doing today, too? And
I
he's
did,
super excited,
yeah. And so he's actually overseeing the pour for me today.
Oh, excellent.
But if it works out on the timing, we may get a live shot at the pour.
Yeah,
I
we're
don't
gonna
want
try.
to. I don't want
We're
to
gonna
disappoint you if we can't do it. It's all about the timing, and with the weather we're having right now, ambient temperature affects how long it takes to get the metal to temperature. So if it all works out, we'll get it. Otherwise, we've got some great video that we're going to show in
Yeah,
its
definitely.
place.
We got video. I know we were talking about, they were asking questions about how much gold costs and everything else. Like, I do want to make, we do have a plugin called Kitco. There is a plugin you can download on our website. It'll actually get the volume of a model in ZBrush and then kick out to Kitco PDF and tell you how much it would cost to make that. Is that what you guys are using to see the cost of what something would be, using Kitco to do that?
No, we're not. Actually, we've been estimating sculpture for so long, we use old-fashioned geometry.
Oh, really?
So we kind of break things down into shapes, cylinders, spheres, squares, cubes, come up with the surface area. We estimate the surface area.
So you're just measuring everything.
We're measuring
on the
everything,
parts.
and we, have a pretty good understanding of what that's going to net out to. I will say my gut level instinct
Yeah.
for that stuff 19 years ago wasn't very good, and I relied heavily on Angel, who's the foundry manager. But we often each quote something, and then we double check to see if we're coming up about the same, and then rationalize it.
Right.
The beautiful thing about working with 3D models is you can get a surface area takeoff.
Right, from.
So it gives you
yeah.
the exact amount of mass you're going to have for all the materials.
And ordering the right
And then-
material
and
amount,
then-
because that's the worst thing, order too much material. You're like, what am I going to do with all this? You
Yeah,
know?
well, we.
But it can stay, and then you can use it on another project.
Yeah, for us, we buy a lot of material.
How often are you guys doing purchases of materials?
Well, in the old days, it was pretty much just in time. So,
Okay.
we would get deliveries of things usually every week,
Okay.
bronze about every 3 weeks. But after COVID, we have been doubling down on volume of material inventory just to make sure we have it. Because in our world, if I don't have bronze,
Then
and
you
I'm a
don't
bronze
have anything
foundry,
to
I
do.
don't have a business.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting on 9-month supply right now. It's at an offsite location, and we just make sure we've got everything lined up that we need, so
Yeah.
we don't have to stop production. We've got plenty of time to resolve logistics and supply chain issues.
I know you and I were also talking about with COVID, like what people might not understand, a foundry, right? They're kind of within a certain radius where artists are just using within a close foundry to them. But you have clients from all over the place that
We
you're
do.
making. So they understand, where are some of these clients shipping stuff from to you?
Oh, we've got clients in France, in the UK, Ireland. We've got a couple in Australia. We've got clients in Hawaii. We've got clients, a couple in Asia. So it's
All over the
really
place.
all over the world.
Wow.
And, a lot of times they're sending in a maquette that's going to get enlarged, maybe through Troy, to become a large sculpture.
Okay, so you got, they're scanning, right? He's scanning it and then he's making
Yeah,
it
so
big.
sometimes Troy, like we did a big project. In fact, the very first project that was ever done between Form and us was we had a client, Spar Street, who had a whole collection of new works done in plaster of Paris on Maui.
Oh, wow.
That were all large pieces that all needed to be prepped and brought over here. And he was asking, how do you create these to get them there safely? And I said, you're never going to ensure that 15 new plaster sculptures are going to arrive here in one piece.
Right.
So this is really where Troy and I started pioneering this process with his partner, Rob Arps. So we sent Troy over to Hawaii. He got paid hazard pay for that, and he scanned 15 pieces over there. And then we took those data files and we transported those as opposed to the actual sculptures.
Right.
Then we were able to print them and make molds from those 3D prints.
Wow.
And then we made waxes out of those. We used the traditional process.
Right, I think, Troy, you're still with us, right?
Yes,
I heard-
correct. I did go
Yeah,
body
so what-
surfing while I was there too.
There we go. What scanner were you using? Was it obviously just a handheld scanner, or were you doing photogrammetry?
I use an ATOS scanner for the fine art stuff
yeah.
because of its accuracy. We use handheld scanners for life scans. We have photogrammetry for using a Nikon for things that are outside or needing of large volume photogrammetry scans.
Right, that's pretty awesome. And I also like to point out, you guys are being kind enough to be a sponsor for us this year. So thank you, Troy and Brett, for being a sponsor. And what the lucky winner of our Sculpt Off is going to get is a bronze up to an 18-inch, right? And that, obviously, it's got to be something that can be manufactured.
Subject to approval.
Subject to approval by Brett.
And Troy.
And Troy. So they'll work with that artist to see what they could bronze for you up to an 18-inch. So I'm super excited that we're able to do it. So thank you both for doing that and offering that to the community. I think that's awesome. I'm like, how can I compete and get this prize? Because I want to put bronze all over my house.
Well, I think, it can be intimidating to make that leap of faith from a digital screen to the hard, tangible world. And we want to make that easy. We want to show people it's really quite doable once you just get over the learning curve. Right. And there's no better way to do it than go through the learning process. And Troy's great at helping people, and we think we are too. So again, it's a collaboration. We'd be glad to see if we can help anybody get there.
Yeah, I know, like Troy, for you, I would say if someone comes to you, obviously you've been working with Brett, figuring this out, hey, if I just want to try and figure this out, I usually tell people just send something off for a 3D print and try just doing some simple molds and casts at your house so you can start getting a little bit of understanding of drafts. Is that something you usually tell people if they come to you, hey, how would I get into this?
No, for sure. It's like, and if people are having a hard time committing, sometimes like, I'll print if they're worried about what the print's going to look like, I'll just print them a sample of that model or maybe a small section for them to look at, or, and if they committed to like having something printed small as a model to see what it might look like at the final scale, let's say like 3 feet or 6 feet, you print a small one, it's a lot cheaper. Then you get that print, you take a look at it and say, I want to change these things, or it looks great, let's go with the large model. So,
right. And then go ahead.
Yeah, and Troy, just when people think about taking a maquette size and enlarging it for a monument, I know file size and density is going to make a difference, but what's your general recommendation for how much how many times up they can multiply it before they have data loss?
I mean, that's kind of interesting, especially if you're talking about ZBrush models, because ZBrush models, like there's areas that will have a high mesh count, and other areas where the artist hasn't, like capes and those things can have a lower density of triangles or quads, and so when you enlarge it, because it's kind of infinite scale in the computer, but when you go to print it out, you just have to make sure that the density is tight enough that you're not going to see a triangle when you print it. And, so, I think, and maybe that requires like printing a sample. If you're going to something that's, let's say, like a 50-foot model, you might see those triangles in areas, so you want to make sure that the mesh gets tighter in those areas.
Sure. Brett's like a co-host right now. Look at that question.
Yeah.
I'm in this. Let's do it.
And generally, if you think about if you double the height of a sculpture, you quadruple or so the mass. So that's why something this tall, let's just round numbers, say it's $1,000, but if you go to this tall, it could be $3,000 or $4,000. And it seems like, wow, it's not a whole lot more size.
Right.
However, the mass, the surface area, everything
there's also
is
going to be more pieces.
There's
too.
more pieces. There's more everything. So
right. And
the inverse is also true. When you get real small, now you're trying to do almost jewelry level work, and you're talking about wearing loops, and you're in there with really fine dental tools and things, trying to do the work. So then you can have the opposite thing happen, where a really small piece could be more expensive than the next size up. So sometimes, and that's the kind of thing Troy and I can help people figure out too.
Yep. They also, for this event, they did a bronze for us, and we're going to be showing you videos as Brett and I walk through the foundry here. They did Dan Bachar's Cheetah that you've been seeing in the background behind myself and Louie these last couple days. Now it's Louie and Ian. So it's going to start, like we said, with Troy, and then he ships it to here. So we have a video of the unboxing of what happens here once it gets to Brett. So I think that'd probably be a good place to start so people can see how does it get from Troy and then into you here. Right? Yeah. So we'll probably roll that video so people can see, and then we'll talk over top of it too.
Yep. And then just for people who are familiar with the bronze casting process, I'm going to bypass a couple of things that aren't specific to doing what I'm now calling lost print casting. So lost wax is the traditional process, and in that would require us to have a mold. In the lost print, the print is actually taking the place of making the mold and making the wax. We could still make a mold if necessary from this particular print, but we could also direct cast it and you save yourself the cost of a mold. So this is how the parts come to us. We could probably pause that for a second and we'll walk back to that back room, or you can show it while we walk actually. So these are the parts as they come to us, and the parts that are there.
Yeah, we're paused, so we'll walk back to that
Okay.
room.
So where we're going to go now is where we do the gating of the pieces. So excuse me guys. Shut up.
We're here.
We're here. So this is where the gating actually happens. And if you want to go back to that video and finish rolling it, we're going to show the piece as it's being gated. And so this is how it comes in. And I think you're all seeing this live. We go through and the gates go on to allow for the evacuation of the print and the wax that surrounds it. So we lose it. That's the lost part of the lost wax or lost print casting. And so what Kenny has to keep in mind is how do you get everything to flow out, and then you're going to turn that shell over to pour it and fill it with bronze. So we're thinking about the exit of wax and the entry of the bronze, and all that has to be engineered on the fly for unique pieces every time, which is what makes this different than, say, a commercial foundry where they have the opportunity to say, okay, we're going to make 1,000 or 10,000 of these. Let's optimize this with, computational fluid dynamic software, figure out what's going to be the best way to get the wax out, what's the most efficient way to get the best casting, by the way we gate it to get the bronze where we want it to be, and to cool properly and all of that. We don't have that luxury. We have to rely entirely on our gut instinct and experience to tell us what's the right way to do that. So looking at this, Kenny's been putting these gates on this, and he's figuring all of that out. The cup at the bottom acts two purposes. One, it's a plug, which hopefully will melt out quickly and then it allows the wax to drain out, but it also becomes the pouring spout or the funnel that we can pour the bronze into.
So how are you figuring out how many gates exactly? Is that another one of those just from experience?
Just from experience,
and then
for the
Kenny,
most part.
We got him live now.
We got Kenny live
Kenny's
here.
live here. There he is.
So Kenny has been doing this for a long time. A lot of what we have to figure out is the geometry of the piece, and then what is it going to take to get the bulk of the wax out as quickly as possible. So as we do that, here's some other pieces that are in the shell room. So we're going to go in the shell room now and take a look. And we can maybe take a pan across the shell room. You'll just see what's going on in here. I apologize for the sound if it's a little wonky, but we keep this room temperature and humidity controlled. And what you're going to see here is there's two slurry tanks, number 1 and a number 2, and then there's a pre-dip. And then we got 3 different levels of grains of sand. So we have a really fine sand, which we call a flour. And then we move into grain sizes, which are a little more coarse. And then we get to the thickest, which is here.
So what's the reason for doing the multiple levels of this sand?
Yeah, so the process is we're going to capture detail first. So we're going to dip in the slurry, which we've got going on right here. That acts as an adhesive or a binder. Then we're going to dust it up, which you might see here in a minute. You'll certainly see it in the
we
video.
got a video to play. Yeah.
And so we do a couple of coats of that. That helps us capture the detail that's in that wax. Once the detail is encapsulated, now we're starting to build for strength. So we're going to then continue on. This room, it's about a day. Go ahead and shoot
The
this.
fun part. The fun
This is
part.
play in the sandbox.
Yeah, it is playing the sandbox a bit, yeah.
So the process is we dip in the colloidal silica, which is a slurry. Then we sand it. Then we set it aside to dry for 24 hours. And then we come back and do that again. So depending on the size of the piece that we're doing, this is 6 to 8, maybe 10 on a really big piece, layers. And so, you know, this room alone can take a week to 10 days just to get a piece through here. So this is what's happening. And then those will go on the shelf and they'll sit. The color yellow is a dye indicator, so as the moisture evaporates out, those go to a more matte color, more of a tan color. And at this point, if you want to roll the video about the
so
cat,
you can see the whole process.
you can actually see the cat doing its part of the process.
Sure.
So that's going to be video number 2.
Yeah, so we'll play that. So this is doing the whole process from the beginning and what it looks like.
Yep.
So this is the cheetah, correct?
This
that
is
we're
the
looking
cheetah.
at. And then this is the
Yeah.
first dip.
This is
that
the
we're
first
seeing.
dip.
And what's that solution? What is that?
This is
exactly?
colloidal silica. So
Okay.
it's a silica and some other minerals suspended. We keep it rotated. There's a propeller shaft in there, which is keeping it constantly mixed.
Wow, look at that. So there's the
That's
front.
one dip.
That's the front. That's one dip, and then
Yeah.
24 hours.
Yep, and I
On there.
abbreviated this for everybody because it's like watching paint dry, but
Right.
I think I showed 3 or 4 dips here in the video.
Yeah.
We actually did 6 or 7 on this particular piece.
So is there a set number for the dips, or you just
Yeah, again,
you're looking at how
we're
the
looking
piece
at
is
the
coming
size
out,
of the
what it's
piece
coming
and the
out as.
complexity of the piece and how everything's going to flow.
And so this is creating a shelled wall.
This is
So that when the
the
wax pulls out, that is in essence going to be the mold.
This is the temporary casting mold.
Yeah.
So in a traditional lost wax process, we would have started with what we call the mother mold or the master mold. We would have made a wax out of that mold. We've bypassed that part of the process, and now we're going straight to this print.
Wow.
And we're going to make the temporary mold. We're going to burn out the print, and then the remaining shell that's left behind we'll fill with bronze.
And what's this dip? This is a different color.
This is number 2, which is a heavier, it's also a colloidal silica, but it's got more sand, with actually a flour type material as well.
And the fun part,
It's just
playing in the
heavier.
sandbox.
And so now we're just building for strength. And so we want more material to be able to build up on each coat than we did in the beginning.
And then that's why you're going with the bigger grain of sand.
We go with a bigger grain of sand
So
and a
just
thicker
creating
slurry
a-
so we can build strength faster.
And you're just constantly now at this stage, when you get to that thicker grain, you're always dipping in just that barrel.
In just that one. So we do 3 to 4 in the first barrel, and then we go to the second barrel for the balance. And this is the seal coat. And so that
There it
one will
is.
dry, and then that'll be ready for casting.
That's awesome. Right?
Perfect place to end.
That's so cool to see live.
Yeah. So that's
For
it.
sure. And you got to see it live too. Thank you for being here. Sorry to
Yep.
interrupt.
So
We'll
now-
continue on the tour.
We're going to walk on through the tour, and we're going to walk this way. Let me know if the
Yeah, we're going into
Tooling.
a loud area, so
if
just
that's
so you're
too much,
aware,
I can have them stop.
I'm going to be the gatekeeper to the camera here too. Oh, this is the fun part. Here we go.
So this is the foundry area. We're getting ready for a pour today. In the background over there is the kiln, and the kiln has all the shells in it. And then over here we have the furnace, which is about 400 pounds of bronze being brought up to temperature. So the shells were previously burned out to de-wax. Then they go back into the kiln the day of casting to bring them back up to temperature. It's kind of the idea, you don't want to pour hot water into a cold glass that might shatter. So we want to bring the shells up. They're basically now vitrified ceramic material based on silica sand. And so they're very strong, but they're brittle. And they'll take that bronze really nicely. The bronze we're going to heat up to approximately 2,000 to 2,100 degrees, depending on what we're casting today. And the oven will be somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 degrees.
Look at that. Like that's green coming off.
Yeah,
it's like Christmas colors.
beautiful
Guys,
to
you
watch.
seeing this over here? Look at this thing. This is incredible. This is awesome. So this is getting it ready for a pour. And you say you're trying to do a pour today.
We're going to be doing a pour today.
10:30ish is when
So
you're...
the pour is ready when the metal is ready. So it's all about things happening. Ambient temperature affects how long that takes. Not significantly, but it can make a difference of 10 to 20 minutes depending on what's going on that day.
And what are you trying for an outdoor temperature? What's like really what you're looking
We
at?
pour every day.
So is there a certain temperature? You're like, okay, it's this degree, let's get going.
It would probably be ideal if it was somewhere around 70 degrees on a daily basis, but it's not. So we have to deal with what Mother Nature gives us. And we pour here in the summertime, and it might be, 80 degrees at 8 o'clock in the morning. So,
wow. Yeah, you pour as early as like sometimes 7.
So if you want to roll the video there.
Yeah, we got a video of them doing a pour. This is of the cheetah.
This is of the cheetah
doing the pour as well,
doing
right?
the pour, actually pouring the piece. So here's what happens. They pull the crucible out, they get it set up and get it ready.
Wow. Look at that. So it takes 4 people?
It's a 4-man crew that does this every time. So now they're going to slide the trolley out of the oven. This has got the hot shells in it. That's over 1,000 degrees right there. Notice they're all wearing spacesuits to keep the heat reflected
Is this the original
off.
trolley? Like from the, do you know? It's like the original?
No. We built this oven.
Built a new one?
We actually built this oven and designed it for the 3D prints because we wanted to make sure we could burn them out environmentally correct. So we've got an afterburner, and we've just redesigned the burner systems to get a really complete firing, so we're not putting a lot of pollution out into the environment. So the pieces you see there in the lower left are the front and back of the cheetah, and then they're going to finish off the pour.
Wow. Look at that. That's incredible.
And the gentleman you see there in the plaid shirt is actually the founder of the company originally.
Oh, yeah?
That's Elliot.
All right, we'll pause this right now. We'll give you pause that real quick.
Well, we're actually done with that. So now we're going to go and we're going to reveal it. So this is, now that the bronze is cooled, which is probably a couple hours later, we're going to knock it out and we're going to remove that outer shell, which is lost in the process.
Right.
So,
but you want to get a live shot too, you guys can see if you can see this live, so you can see what this space looks like too. You can see obviously the metal getting heated up, the bronze getting heated up over there.
and if the timing gods work out for us, we'll come back and shoot the actual pour if it works out for everybody.
Yeah, and then they come over here right after the piece.
Yeah, so after they're done,
and we'll play that part of the video after we get over to this area.
so this is where we
got
do
a live one here. Here you go.
Yeah. So this is where we do a knockout and cleanup. You can go ahead. Say it.
Go ahead, you can get in there a little bit closer.
So the first thing is to get all the shell material off, and then we cut off the gates. So he's going to be doing all of that. And then we sandblast the piece in the cabinet over to the left there.
Did you see it? We're seeing it live. We're lucking out today, getting all this stuff live too. This is great. So in this, I think,
And this
like,
will be
this is
noisy because
hardcore.
he's jackhammering. So he's being very careful to not damage the art piece. He's only working on the backside. Last thing we want to do after we do all that work is put divots in it from the jackhammer.
Yeah, so we have that video. We can play that video, and you can see it. We'll move over to a quieter area. So you can play the rest of that video. So this is them doing the cheetah.
So here we go. So this is the cheetah being revealed. So we break off that very carefully, use a chipping hammer, or we'll use the jackhammer like you saw live. But basically pulling the casting out. And for this project, if you remember, there was 3 parts. There's a front and a back.
And then the base.
Then we're going to take the base. This is showing the cutoff on that.
Wow. So they're slowly, like this is an art form, everyone. Like
So all that piece, all the pieces that are the gates and the cup, those are going to get recycled and reused again.
Oh, so they're melted down again.
They're going to get melted down.
How often can that be melted down?
Well, we mix in about 30%, unless it's a really specific piece that we have to use pure ingot, we can mix in about 30% each time.
Okay.
So we use 30%.
And that's what this is over here?
And this is the scrap.
This is, you want to get a shot of that, of the leftover pieces?
So this is a gate structure and a cup, and the pieces have already been cut off, and we'll just put this in for tomorrow, and we'll melt that back down.
And again, the gate's really important to make sure that wax and then the bronze is getting everywhere
Getting
at
where
the
it
right
needs to go.
temperature.
It's basically it's a manifold.
Yeah, right. And then you come into the next part of the shop.
Okay, so the next part of the process is in here. This is our metal chase department. So in here we've got a couple of welding systems set up. There's another welder outside for bigger work. And then each one of these stations is a place for the guys to do the tooling. So what we're going to see here, I'm going to walk you over to this bench.
Yep.
So this is the work area for one of our guys. You can see all the different tools that he's using.
And get in there close. Take a look at those, those tools.
Most of our team has been doing this for 20 plus years.
20 plus years.
My top guy is, I think, at over 30.
Really?
35.
Wow.
And, so over time, they figure out things that solve problems of retexturing. Because really what we have to do at this point is we're going to weld together all the parts, and then we do what we call chasing. We have to chase those welds away to make them disappear to the eye, which really means on heavy texture pieces, we have to texture, and we've got to match the texture that the artist originally came up with.
Right.
On smooth pieces, it's just simply about smoothing it back out and keeping it so there's no divots or imperfections that the eye sees. So how we get there, a lot of different tools.
Right. And then is this the other video that we have of them cutting it up?
They're actually doing the chasing of this. There's some shots of welding and tooling. So if the audio is okay in this room, we can stay here and they can run that.
Yeah, we can stay in here and they can run that video because it's related to this video. So we'll play that video for you all so you can see exactly what they're doing at this bench. Is this the actual bench we're
looking at? This is the actual bench we're looking at. And this is the actual cheetah. And we're taking probably 3 hours of work and condensing it down into a minute and a half or so.
Usually, so this is hours and days and weeks worth, especially a large project.
Yeah, depending on the project.
And I like to point out, guys, this is like an art form. This is why we wanted to show this to you. These people are also artists. Even in the wax room, in this room, they're, in essence, trusting the foundry to redo part of their sculpts once they're done welding everything together. Like, here you go. Here's him working on that part of the cheetah.
So he's welded it. Now he's retexturing it to blend it all in. And typically,
go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, and so typically, once we do the basic work on this, the artist comes in and does a metal check.
The artist does come in, or
so
you send a picture,
or we send a picture, or we zoom, or whatever.
Yeah.
But we give them the opportunity to look at it closely, and if they were here, they would simply take a Sharpie pen, circle anything that they want to address. It goes back to the guy on the bench, and he addresses those issues to get it just the way they want it.
It's coming together.
Yeah, so this is it.
So how often have you had to, hey, no, let's tear down, start again? Does that happen?
No, that doesn't really happen. No. I mean, for the most part, everything's salvageable and workable. It's pretty intuitive when you've been doing it to know how things go together. There's not a lot of mystery to it. I've heard horror stories from other foundries putting the left hand on the right arm and things like that, but I think our team here pretty much knows their left and their right.
That's great. This is awesome. So you got the room in the back.
Yeah, so we could take one more step back here.
Yeah. Come with me, people.
So this is where we get to some of the back end parts of the process. And
I'm underdressed. Everyone's like,
so for example, right here is a polishing station.
Oh, here we go.
So Eddie's doing polishing on the pieces. So after it's been cast, chased, patinaed, he's going back and putting a polished edge on a certain part. This happens to be the Writers Guild Award, which we produce every year. So we've got 125 of these to produce this year, and they've all got to be done.
125?
125. Varies every year depending on what they think they're going to be the number.
Was that done in like clay, or was that digitally done?
The original of this was sculpted in clay and then molded, but over the years that original model got lost. So just this year we had to go back and we sent it to Troy. They 3D scanned it, and then they reprinted it, and we made it, instead of dipping it in the wax like we saw them do, they can also dip in epoxy resin. So we did that because we wanted a mold master and we didn't want any distortion.
Right.
So it gives you it's almost like carbon fiber at that point. Makes a great model. Great master. We remolded it, and then all of the subsequent castings are coming out of the mold on that.
Nice. This is beautiful.
So it's another application for the 3D printing in that particular way. So
great.
he's doing polishing here.
We're going deeper. We're going deeper.
Going way back.
We're going
into
way
this.
back.
So this is where everything from base mounting happens to putting the felt on the bottom of the base. Mario's been with us for longer than he'll admit, but what he does here is all the final detailing. And so he oversees all of the finishing, the back end of the process, so everything from patina through to the polishing, through to any fine detailing, any painted elements of a sculpture, whatever, and make sure that everything goes out of here approved. And then we also do all the packing and crating back here. And here's that same Writers Guild Award. These have all been patinaed, but they're going to need the polishing on them, so those will feed up, and then Mario approves those. And then when we need to, we do crating here as well, which is right behind us over here.
You guys build your own crates yourselves then, specific to each piece?
Sometimes
or?
we build our own. There's some really great crating companies around, and one of the benefits of being here in the Valley and in the middle of the entertainment industry, there's a number of resources for everything.
Right.
So we've got some great crating suppliers. For the big sculptures, they actually come out, measure, pre-cut everything they need for a skid or for the crate, and then they assemble it right around the piece right here and put it on a truck and drive it away. So it's hard to beat that level of service.
Man, I can't. I'm intrigued to see what people are saying online right now. Ian and Louis, please go ahead. Field anything you want to throw at me.
Questions over there? Just everyone is stunned.
Everybody is just stunned and in awe. And
They're stunned, Brett, online. They're in awe.
They're really
They're
just
having a good
No
time.
feedback.
Really
So we're
just
going to go
going
back
through
up
it,
now
yeah.
to the patina area.
Paul, we actually did have a question about what type of Sharpie they use for their checking of the print.
Yep, great question. So, Brett, you had mentioned the artists have a Sharpie that they mark the piece off with.
Yes.
They're asking what type of Sharpie? Is it just a normal black
a black Sharpie,
and that's
yeah.
it? It's nothing spectacular.
Yeah, it's Staples. Go to Staples,
Yeah.
you can get a Sharpie.
There you go.
Yeah. Fine point.
Yeah, fine point. No, that's a good point. Yeah. So we're heading to another room here.
This is the patina area. So it's okay to shoot this piece. What Ricardo's doing here is he's doing the patina on this diver.
That's awesome.
And so he's warming the metal, and then he's going to apply chemical. He's going to reheat it, and that's going to cause an oxidation.
Stay there for a minute.
Brett, I know we talked how hard it would be to get stuff live. This is just incredible that your team has been able to do this stuff live.
Yeah, it just worked out.
Thank you so much for opening up your shop and allowing this. This is just amazing.
So
Absolutely
this is a
incredible.
multi-level patina. It's very similar to the one we did on the cheetah. So he's putting down a base coat here. Looks like that's M20 to darken it up first, and then he's going to come back with a lighter color on top after he rubs back some of the dark. So what we're trying to create is contrasting color tones in it and give some warmth and some nuance to it. So we put down a color, we rub some of it off, we put another color on top, we rub some of that off, then we put another color. You know, sometimes we can do 3 or 4 different layers, and that really gives the piece more humanity and more warmth, and it makes it feel like something that's really been made by hand.
And then the artist is picking these out immediately, or when do they pick out their patina that they want? Assuming they do immediate.
We always suggest you think about it as you're sculpting it.
Okay.
Because if you're going to do a complex piece and you want to register different color tones in different areas, it's nice to have a demarcation point sculpted in where that break happens. Other people, just come in and they say, oh, all of a sudden I think I want this green. Right? Because
once they see it on the model, they change their mind a little bit.
And one of the things we see a lot is that most sculptors think monochromatically because they're working in one material, especially traditional and clay. So they really haven't thought about the color exploration.
Right.
And then once they see it, those kinds of ideas start to happen for them, and that's why we have so many samples.
I've got a project for Ian. He's going to start making some patina materials for ZBrush, so people can just throw it on and at least get a general
There you go.
gauge.
Would love to
Ian,
talk
you're
to them
welcome.
about that.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul.
This is just, we got a video too of
And
the
this
cheetah.
is an art form in itself.
Right.
Ricardo's
100%.
been doing this probably at least 30 years.
30 years. So you got like a
not more. So
top-notch crew in
the
here.
average tenure in our shop is over 20 years.
Wow.
So that's, that's people that know what they're doing. If you think about it beginning to end, it's about 10 steps in the process. All of those people are specialists. And they're all artisans in their own right.
Yeah.
Because they have to be able to get in the head of the sculptor and reproduce what their original intent was.
This is
We'll step out and play that video so we're not
we can play the
disrupting
finished
him anymore.
Yeah.
video of the patina.
We'll play that video of the patina so you all can see that. So let's go ahead and play that cheetah patina.
So again, we're warming it up. We're applying chemical.
Look at that.
And you'll notice it changing right before your eyes. That's how quickly the oxidative process happens.
Wow, look at that.
Wow.
It's gorgeous. I'm gonna
So
come over more often.
Sometimes it's done with a chip brush, sometimes it's done with a spray bottle. So here he is, as I talked about, he's rubbing back that initial coat of patina, and you'll see that it's making a little more luster on certain areas.
Yeah.
And that'll come through the lighter shades of patina that will go over the top.
And this is just a regular scrub brush.
It's a Scotch-Brite pad.
Scotch-Brite pad,
Yeah,
nothing
industrial
special.
Scotch-Brite.
What kind of chemical
This is
it?
an art form.
Yeah.
What kind of chemical they're asking online? What is
Yeah,
this?
so this is what we would call a liver ferric patina. So this is liver of sulfur, which gives the blacker color.
Say that 5 times, Louis.
And then you've got ferric oxide, which gives you, depending on how you mix it.
Is that what
and,
that is right now?
I
The
think
blue?
I think he's still on the liver. Actually, that might be M20. He might have used M20 and not liver. They're kind of interchangeable. But then the ferric will give you the more golden color on top.
Wow.
Yeah,
And
go
here he
ahead.
is.
Throw the questions when you can, Ian.
I think he's waxing it up right now. So he's already finished the patina. Again, we've abbreviated a 2-hour process down to
Right.
something that's consumable for right now.
And we've got
And here's the final piece.
the final piece.
So there it is.
Wow.
And
Yin
You get
Bichar,
this-
if you're watching, look at that. Bronzed it.
so if you look down here, he added a little bit of green to the color. I don't know if that's coming through on the lens, but he created a little bit more of a natural, maybe some dirt with the rock in the background. And then we've got the cat. So basically a finished piece at this point. Sometimes that might go on a base, granite base is often used, but again, it's personal preference. With a piece like this, you could just put a piece of felt on the bottom and call it done.
That's beautiful.
That's amazing.
Looks
You
great.
said there was questions coming through?
Yeah, we had a few questions.
Yeah.
So first one, have they attempted to do 3D printing directly into the mold stage without the dips? Is that like something that is possible?
So someone's asking about the 3D printing. Have you guys ever tried yet just taking the 3D print itself and putting it into the stage, the molding stage, with the sand and the dips?
Well, you could, but it would just encapsulate the piece and you wouldn't be able to pour it. So it wouldn't, if I'm understanding the question right, that wouldn't give us the ability to turn it into a casting because it wouldn't have the feed pipes, if you will, for the bronze to flow
Right.
in. Yeah.
Yeah. I would be intrigued because there are some materials that can print in a lost wax for 3D printers. It'd be interesting to see how well that would
Right.
work after you, what was his name again? In the doing the gating?
The gating was Kenny.
Kenny.
Yeah.
Kenny. If that would work with what Kenny's doing. Because again, people, this is an art form. This is incredible. And again, I can't appreciate what you open up your shop
If
to
the
us.
question was meant to be, can you 3D print a mold to pull something out of? Yes, and Troy could speak to that better than I could in terms of what they can actually do there. You're essentially printing the negative as opposed to the
Yep,
positive.
which has been
but
done,
then you
yeah.
would have to go back and make a wax out of that. So you'd have a wax to put through the process going back to the original traditional process.
Right, because your temperature, what is the temperature you're getting to again when you guys do the actual pour?
The pour?
Of the bronze itself.
It's roughly 2,000 degrees, plus or minus. Yeah.
Wow. There's another question coming through, Ian. You want to throw at me as well?
So apprenticeships, or how does somebody get into this field?
How do you get into this field?
You come and fill out an application. I mean, that's basically
Anybody
it.
in the Burbank area want to come over with Brett and the team here?
It's a trade or a skill that you really need to be committed to. It's not one of those things you're going to come in and learn it in a few weeks. I mean, I would say it takes 6 to 12 months for somebody to be even a reasonably competent metal tooler. It takes welding skills and then texturing skills, which if you're a sculptor already and you understand that, that's great. Or you have a background in metalworking, that's great. Other parts of the foundry are easier to learn more quickly, but you really have to have a, a holistic mindset because everything is dependent on the step before it. So you have to be able to think forward and you got to understand what happened before you so that you can give coaching and guidance and feedback back to the people that maybe got the piece up to that part.
Right.
And one of the things that we try to do as a strategy for how we manage the business is we don't have one overseer of quality that walks around to make sure that everything that's done in here is up to snuff. We require each employee to be responsible for their own quality, and when they put it forward to the next department, there's a handoff where that other department gets to accept it or reject it.
Oh, really?
And reject it with comments,
Right.
so that someone
Like
can go
what's-
back
what
and
needs to be fixed,
what needs to be fixed
done.
before I take it,
Right.
so that it's optimized for me.
And you've had generation of people you've mentioned here, right? That
Yes.
have worked. You've
I mean, we've had
multiple
many
generations.
grandparents, kids, and now seeing grandkids come through here. So
Wow.
the business was started back in the late 70s. So, you know, it's been plenty of time for multi-generations.
Yeah, I saw Angel just walk by, and
Yeah.
he's had both. You said, I think both his sons.
All three of his
All
sons
three
have
of his
worked here.
sons.
Yeah. Yeah, my daughter's 19, has no interest, but she's
like,
got
"Looks
other-
good, Dad."
Yeah, looks. Yeah, that's your thing. That's a guy thing. That's her attitude. But you know, whatever.
Do you? So I gotta ask, for you owning this, how many bronzes do you have at your house? So you got like some personal pieces that you're like, I want one of those. That's amazing.
I hate to say this, but I have only one.
Only one.
Only one.
Is it a
Yeah.
big one or something?
It's a small
more,
one.
like-
It's a desktop.
Oh, nice.
And it was a gift
Right.
from a client.
Well, so you see it
Here's
all
the
day.
problem.
Yeah.
I do this
all day. Yeah.
I don't think that I could make a commitment to a bronze that I love enough that I'm going to own for a long period of time, because
Right.
every day I'm inspired by something new.
You're just seeing so much artwork. come
I
through
see
here.
so much artwork. I estimated at one time, and this is like 10 years ago, that even at that point in time, between the pieces I've estimated or produced, I have probably seen 10,000 sculptures.
Wow.
So trying to process that into something I love that and make a decision to
Right.
own it is hard, you know.
But those of you who want bronze, here you go. We've got Brett here. We'll put you in contact.
Yeah,
you get
come
a
on.
bronze or ZBrush models. Do we want to take another quick look at the patinas so people
Yeah,
can
we can-
see the
we can
wall of
walk up
patinas that you
there,
guys are doing here too? Because that's
kinda give a close-up.
like you said, that's an art form too.
Yeah.
Like
And specifically
that's something
with-
specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, specifically with the patina, is it easy to change colors?
Is it easy to change colors with the patinas?
Well, it is when you're applying it. If you don't like the result, you have to go back to sandblasting it and start all over again. So these are all patinas. This is one collection we've developed.
These are and then these are yours, right? You have your own specific patinas that you at AFA.
We have a recipe for all of these.
right.
So we can reproduce them. And so we can train the team on how to do them. And I don't know, there's like 250 here total on the wall.
Wow.
Wow. And the process we saw earlier with with the patina for large monumental statues.
Processes for earlier for the patina
Is it similar? Is it the
with
same?
large monument
More
stuff.
difficult?
How similar is it? What's the
Yeah,
difficulty
so
behind
the whole challenge is to keep the bronze warm, right? So you got to get it heated up.
that? Sort of flamethrower.
Basically, you're using a bigger torch head. It's a
Yeah.
big propane torch, and it puts out a big flame. And oftentimes they'll work as a team. And some guys, and I know a couple of them, they work with two torches. So when they're getting the initial heat going, they've got two
They've got
torches.
some stands to put them down to.
Yeah, so they just
Yeah.
set them down, usually on a table, but they get that piece heated up like crazy.
Wow.
And they're just, you know. and
So in a
sometimes it's
large
two or
piece, is
three.
it more than one person doing it? Is it still only one person?
No, it's generally a couple of people.
Couple people.
So the monumental pieces is usually a couple of people, one person applying the material, the other person managing the heat. You know, they work as a team. Sometimes if it's obvious in a way that they could do it, so they're not burning each other, they'll work on different parts of the sculpture.
Right. And anybody that's here in the Burbank area, I'd recommend the Batman that they were talking about. It's here in Burbank. It's in
Yeah.
downtown Burbank, right across from the movie theater.
Yeah, the
right in
AMC
center there.
16 right in the
AMC 16.
plaza.
That Troy and Brett did. Go see it in person. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I went
And a
took
little
some
shout out to
pictures.
the voice actor who just recently passed away. So if you go there right now, there's a bunch of roses and flowers at the base of it. And I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. I just heard it on the news this morning. But he passed away recently, and so people have been
sad to hear.
honoring him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a lot of loyal fans for Batman.
Yeah. Well, Batman's a main character
Yeah.
for sure for a lot of us and people watching online for sure. We're dorks
Yeah.
in the heart.
No, we love
so,
this stuff.
Yeah, we love this stuff for sure. Ian, any other questions that I can throw to Brett before we kick it back to you at the studio?
I think, everybody's in awe.
Everyone's in awe.
Yeah,
They're
there's
really
there's a lot of
enjoying
really
the
good
workshop.
questions coming through, but I'm not sure if we have a whole lot of time. But yeah, more specifically, going back to that 3D printing one, the question was really pertaining like 3D printing with putting on gates and like prepping the whole print
Oh,
with
so you can do the
gates.
whole thing in 3D printing?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we've experimented with that. The problem is the acrylic material burns very slowly. And we actually want to use wax gates so we can get them out of the way, which then allows combustion to happen inside that shell. So we actually need to have two materials. We need to have one that melts out and eliminates itself very quickly, so we can then focus on the stuff that's more difficult to print out or to burn out. The burnout time on those prints is hours as opposed to, say, 30 minutes. So it's a big
Makes a
difference.
difference.
So there's actually another set of engineering decisions that happen there, which is why we do it the way we do it.
The whole way that you're
you go.
doing it is it seems
Next.
like
Got a harder one?
a magic show. Paul and Brett, thank
Yeah.
you so much for walking us through there. And Troy, I'm here again with Ian in the studio. Ian, those are some great things we got to see again today.
Yeah. It's
Really
super amazing
remarkable.
to see the whole process. Seriously, thank you guys so much for stopping by, hanging out with us, giving us time
you,
to
Brett.
tour everything.
Yeah,
So
a lot of
Troy,
fun.
Brett, thank you so much.
Yeah, we're back here in the studio. Louis Tucci and Ian Robinson. I want to thank the guys on location. Once again, Paul no longer here with me in the studio. I have Ian Robinson, who is now planted firmly on terra firma.
Trying.
But that was the tour of American Fine Art Foundry with Brett Barney and Troy Koenig Wilcox. I want to thank them so much. Don't step away. The ZBrush Summit continues 2022 here live from the Mobian stage in Burbank, California. But before we do anything else, we're going to, now you're in charge of giving it away, as they say. So
Yeah.
we'll be right back with some prize giveaways with Ian Robinson, and the day continues. Thanks for watching so far.
Yes, let's do it.